Morning. I'm Jake. This is Claire and Charlotte. And together, along with your speaker today, this small cadre, our family was granted a tremendous gift by this university when we were given sabbatical for the whole year last year. And it was set up so that Lisa and I could both go out and pursue our academics, our research, our writing, my art making. But to have this opportunity with the whole family was something we didn't want to take for granted either. And so we weren't looking for a vacation, although we got one. We weren't looking for just a hike, although we did that. What we really needed was a pilgrimage, a way to separate what you're feeling right now, kind of the hustle and bustle, the grind of October, when everything's weighing down, the pace of life in the West. A pilgrimage to reorient ourselves to Christ and his calling on our lives. And so we were thinking about it, we were looking for it, and we discovered through friends and family and media the Camino de Santiago, which if you're not familiar with it, is an ancient pilgrimage. So in the Middle Ages, there were basically 3 pilgrimages that you could do as a Christian in that part of the world. You could travel to the Holy Land in Jerusalem, you could travel to the holy city of Rome, or in the 9th century, they discovered in western Spain, at a place called Compostela, the remains of the Apostle James. Now, James had walked after Christ and was preaching the gospel and fell in love with the people of the region of Spain. He had followed a Roman trade route to the west to a place they called Finisterre, what they thought was the end of the world at the time. And he returned to the Holy Land and was martyred and became St. James. And his followers took his remains back to the place he loved and buried them there in a field. When they were discovered in the 9th century, these people began making this pilgrimage mostly in the Iberian Peninsula. But then in the 12th century, when the Pope realized that this was there, he granted a special privilege to Santiago, in that you could get, if you walked this Camino, particularly those from France who'd walk over the Pyrenees as we did, and all the way across Spain, we walked 799 kilometers in total over the course of 48 days. We averaged about 18 kilometers a day, but the Pope decreed in the 12th century, when this kind of started taking off, if you did this and you walked into Santiago, into the cathedral, through the Holy Gate, you were granted a plenary indulgence, which means your sins were forgiven. So the 4 of us right here, we're in the black. We're like little baby sinners right now. It's awesome. Less than a year in, it's fantastic. Excuse me. Anyway, so we started in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port on the French border. Ages ranging from 7 and 11 to 40-ish. We walked every day, and we pondered kind of what this meant. To walk this ancient road, to walk where an apostle had, to follow a Roman road built by slaves, and the path Napoleon would have taken to conquer that part of the world. To pray in churches that are older than this country. It was a really powerful time for us and our family. And while I was in charge of logistics, so I can tell you that at this time, 1 year ago, we had just gotten into Molina Seca at the edge of Galicia, And we had just walked 25.5 kilometers and gone up in elevation about 100 meters. And that we were 5 days out of Leon and less than 2 weeks from reaching our goal in Santiago. Lisa, who's about to speak to you about this, had the tremendous gift to our family of really kind of reminding us what it was for and who we were together and who we were together with Christ. And so if you would, please welcome our favorite person in the world, Lisa Amundson.
Hey guys. Hello, can you hear me? All right. So, journeys begin with hope. It was a wet morning. We had a slow start with a warm breakfast in a sweet little French cafe at the base of the Pyrenees Mountains. Nerves were raw, as they always are at the beginning of an adventure. And when my nerves get raw, I've done the same thing my whole life. I meet a new friend. This morning, it happened to be my waitress, who knew we were heading out onto the cold, wet mountain with our little family, and she was willing to take a moment, as the French often do, to provide comfort. She reminded me that I needed to carry a rock on my journey. Could be any old rock I found, but it would become mine. Then she repeated an old prayer that had been used for centuries on the Camino. Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ in me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ in every eye that sees me, Christ in every ear that hears me. And I thought she was precious. And then she gave me the perfect cup of coffee, and she became a kindred spirit. As I left, I pulled out my iPhone, my lifeline to my world back home. I swiped it to the factory settings and handed it over to her. My phone for a rock. Seemed like a fair trade at the time. I said, merci, thank you for the coffee. Thank you for giving me the courage to give up my tether. And just like that, I was untethered from my journey. For you old-timers in the front, you may be thinking of tethering horses, and to the rest of you, tethering is to a mobile hotspot. But I mean tethered is this notion of deep connection and belonging. It's not just a hookup, but being intertwined on both ends. I'd been tethered to my phone for a long time. It was time to find out what that meant if I let it go. It was freeing. It was breathtaking, and I didn't regret it for any of the seconds on day one. Then day 2 came, and I didn't know what time it was. I didn't know if it was going to rain, and I just had to wonder for the next 4 months how Beyonce was doing. I wanted my phone back, but it was on one side of the mountain, and I on the other in Spain, left with a rock. On the Camino, you're walking for 500 miles, and somewhere in the middle, you hit the Meseta and Burgos, and they're as awful as they sound. You start to hurt like you've never hurt before. When I was here in college at Greenville, I played volleyball, so I had volleyball player legs. But now I'm old, and I do not have volleyball player's legs anymore. Anyway, they're gone now, but my volleyball player ankles are still around. Yeah, I bet Coach Tom doesn't tell you that, ladies. So volleyball player ankles, the ones that sprain and roll and in general are the worst, turn on you when you're 40, especially when you want to walk 500 miles. And I could have called for help, but you know, I left my tether in France for a cup of coffee. Journeys begin with hope, but in the middle they can be cruel. Because this is what happens on a journey, right guys? You start out thinking at the beginning, yes, I've got this. Turns out I am Wonder Woman. And then, blah. Whose idea was college anyway? And midterms in college can make our blahs turn to boo. I know you're sitting here even though you have a research paper for Dr. Marshall, a Com 101 speech for Professor Candy, and a biotest for Dr. Dunkley. And of course, they're all due today, and the stress is building, and you may be thinking this journey is too hard right now, and you can't do it on your own. And I'm here to tell you, you are right. You cannot. As the great lady of the North, Sansa, says, when the snow falls and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. In the middle, you cannot do this alone. College is too hard. Life is too hard. This journey you are on right now, it's too hard alone. We don't just have the word together on our website, plastered on Joy Hall, and at the bottom of every single email, because somebody didn't think of the word independent. This community that you are a part of knows that you cannot do this alone. We can only do this together. We can only do this if we tether. Over 20 years ago, I chose to tether myself to a boy who is gorgeous. But there was also another quality that I was on the hunt for, someone that carries burdens. I was strong, volleyball player legs, right? I could carry my own burdens. Except here's the thing that we don't know at the beginning of a journey. We don't know our journey. We don't know when Burgos is coming, or when you're going to lose your job, or face addiction, or cancer. You don't know when those volleyball legs will leave you with just your ankles. But here's what I promise you. From 20 years down the path, they will. Jake is more than just a tall glass of water. When I could not walk any further with the weight of my pack on my ankle, he did what he does. Here's a photo. Here's a photo of him with my backpack on top of his, carrying my burden for me when I could not. I'm going to take a moment here. Friends, you are making choices right now regarding who you are tethering yourselves to for this long journey ahead of you. A cute face can be on your list, but you are children of God. Tether yourselves to those who will carry your burdens when you cannot, and will continue to do this for years to come. This can sometimes be hard to tell when you're dating, because, hormones. But here is the secret canary in the coal mine test. Do they carry burdens for others, particularly those who have nothing to give them in return? Do they treat people, all people, those with disabilities, the elderly, those who society has deemed unworthy of their time, do they treat them with dignity? Because Jesus did. Do they respect women, those volleyball player ankles, and those with volleyball player legs? Because they know all women are created in the image of God and not simply images on their screen? Are you tethering because you have found a worthy partner, or have you tethered out of fear? Fear that if you do not have that ring by spring, everyone will be able to hear that deep, dark lie that we keep hidden in the back of our mind, the one that says, I am not enough. I do not know if the perfect one is waiting for you at the perfect time and the perfect place, but I know this, you are enough for connection. You are worthy of love and belonging. And if your current tethers hold you back from Christ, from your path, if they do not carry your burdens, cut them off. There's a community here that you can tether to. So we made it to a small village. Jake had heard that there was a shortage on beds, and he knew my ankle couldn't make it to the next town. So we were trying to move as fast as we could. Claire and I were following behind, and we saw Jake and Charlotte turn a corner, and then another corner, and then gone. We lost them. Claire turned to me with big eyes, recognizing the situation of not having her dad and big sister. Clearly, they are the first string of our family. The two of us wandered around town looking for them, asking around for the inn that they might have gone to with no luck. Finally, Claire turned to me and said, "Okay, let me get this straight. You gave Dad your stuff, so we have no money, no passports. And you gave some lady in France your phone because you had to be all free. And now I am here lost with a broken mom." I looked at her and said, "Well, love of my heart, that last part might have been a little sharp since I'm all you've got left. But yes, so what do we have?" And she thought, and she pondered, and she said, "Jesus." I reached into my pocket, I felt my rock, and I heard, "Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ in me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ in every eye that sees me, Christ in every ear that hears me." Every small Spanish village has a constant. The highest point is the church, right in the middle of town. When all you have left is a broken mom and a rock, look up and find that steeple. Then walk towards it. As we walked, I felt the burden of my rock. Days had been spent in prayer over this rock, step by step, without my phone and no knowledge of Beyonce. Burdens in my life had become this rock. Leaving the rock and those burdens behind became my pilgrimage. Once I reached Cruz de Ferro, I left my rock at the foot of the Iron Cross, as thousands of pilgrims had done before me. I simply approached and left what I no longer needed, what I never really needed. Once more, I handed over my burden. But this time, instead of becoming untethered, I felt a fast and sure tethering to a holy God. My rock changed my relationship with prayer. We were on an ancient pilgrimage, but we were still connected to the modern world. We were not oblivious to the hurricanes, the violence, the protests back home. When word would reach us, I would pray. I've heard a few commentaries that in many ways place prayer in contrast to action. All I kept thinking about was that Inigo Montoya quote, "You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means." I guess if prayer does mean an empty condolence, then yeah, please stop that. If prayer means a passive communication before a meal or passing the buck to an empty space, then cut it out. But prayer isn't those things, and it never was. I think prayer might be getting this reputation of inaction because it doesn't have a very good record of changing weather patterns or signing into law new gun regulations. And sure, I have been unsuccessfully praying for more money for a very long time, so on this I agree. There are a lot of things that seem to not change because of prayer. Although prayer is mysterious and miracles do happen, I've never figured out the rhyme or reason for that, and I'm not sure we're meant to. But there are two things I'm 100% sign on the dotted line sure are a truth. First, prayer is how I change. And second, that change tethers me to Christ. I would venture to say that prayer is the only way I change. Prayer might not change the hurricane, but it reminds me that I have more to give to those who are without shelter tonight. Prayer might not change the gunman, but it helps me care for those around me who may feel powerless and angry. Prayer might not create race and reconciliation, but it helps me respect the St. Louis police officers and recognize I have privilege that people of color do not. Prayer isn't neutral, but it's powerful enough to understand nuance. So I don't get to shout at the world to make them change. When I pray, it's just Jesus and me. And in this duo, I'm the jerk. Because biblical prayer requires me to pray for my enemy, it's my perspective changer. I don't get to choose a side or group to pray for. I don't get to pray for only those who agree with me. I just pray. Prayer helps me understand my neighbor to change myself, not express myself to change my neighbor. No wonder I don't really like doing it. And when I spent all day hiking up a mountain with a stinking rock, I remembered that my bias, my unchecked assumptions about my neighbor, are a burden that I don't need. In fact, they're a burden that hurts those I'm tethered to. If I carry a rock, Jake has to carry more than if I was freed up to help him. Prayer doesn't make Jake stronger to carry more for me. Prayer places my rock at the cross so that I might be able to help him with his burden as well. This is how we live in community. This is how we lay down our burdens to help others with theirs so they may journey together, tethered. Second, prayer tethers me to a holy God. Prayer binds me into Jesus, a deep connection and belonging to him. It's not just a hookup, but an intertwined on both ends. There is no promise in life that you will be tethered to a spouse, or you might lose that spouse along with your money and passports in a small Spanish village when he turns the corner. Be strong and courageous. Do not fear or be in dread of them, for it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Deuteronomy 31:6. And behold, I am with you to the end of the age. Matthew 28:20. Be content with what you have, for he said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. And of course, I am sure that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. Romans 8:38-39. The Bible is filled with the promise that Christ will tether to us. We just need to decide if we'll be on the other end. Jake eventually found Claire and I at the church, chatting it up with a sweet old Spanish lady. Remember, I meet new friends. And that night, as I lay down, I felt deep in my bones. Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ in me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ in every eye that sees me, Christ in every ear that hears me. That's my prayer for you today. You're dismissed.